Welcome to this week's live stream. This week we will be talking about banking in Mexico. Um, Real quick, I don't know if Blaine's here already. Um, Actually, I'll wait. Um, hey, Rick, how's it going? Like to say hello to Claudia, Stephanie. Blaine asked a question earlier in the chat. I guess he put the comment in the morning. I'm going to go ahead and answer the question, but if I see you come on, Blaine, or if you chime in later on, um, I'm going to go ahead and answer that question first. Blaine's question was, good evening, Ernie community from La Paz, Mexico. Tonight's topic I'm looking forward to. From last week, any recommendations on cell phone traveling through South America where I'll be heading? Does Telcel offer roaming, or is it better to get a plan as I tour each country? Actually, Blaine, I don't know about Telcel's roam. Oh, okay, Blaine, you're here. Okay. I don't know about Telcel's roaming capabilities. What we did, I'll tell you what we did do. We went down to Guatemala. We traveled to Guatemala last year, and we also made a trip to Costa Rica recently. And both times, what I did, Blaine, real easy, especially in South America. I just went to the grocery store and bought a SIM card. In Guatemala, I actually went to Claro. That we were in Antigua, so downtown they had a Claro. Just walked in, got a SIM card for a week. Actually, they had a data plan for a week, and I used my WhatsApp phone number. Well, I'm connected to data, but I used to communicate with our guide. What I normally do when I do foreign travel, before, and I've done this all the time, and I've done a lot of foreign travel, I just get a local SIM card. That's what I do. And that's been when I've been traveling for work. And depending, usually if I was traveling for work, they used to give me an allowance to go get a local SIM card. But that's what I've always done. That's why I bought the iPhone 16 Pro Max here in Mexico, since it does have a SIM card slot. So that's what I would do, Blaine, is just get a SIM card, local SIM card. You can get, like in Guatemala, I got, in Costa Rica, it was for 30 days, a prepaid SIM card. But I had enough data. And in Guatemala, we were only going to be there we were there for a week. So I bought a week's worth of data. And it was, I think in Guatemala, it was like $15 for the whole week. And it was a good amount of data. So that's my advice. I don't know about Telcel's roaming, to be honest with you. In Latin America, I do know that they roam in the United States. Sometimes I do switch to Telcel when I'm in the United States, because I'm on Cricket, and Cricket is an AT&T deprioritized. You're deprioritized on the AT&T towers, so sometimes my Telcel service comes through better in the United States than it does than Cricket does. But when I'm here in Mexico, Cricket comes through just like regular AT&T. So hopefully that answers your question, Blaine. But I normally get a foreign SIM card. And same thing, even when I went to the Middle East, I just went. And actually, I was in the Middle East for a couple of months. So I just bought 30-day at a time, I guess it was. All I needed was my passport. And they sign you up or whatever. So I've done extensive traveling all over, and I always just get I pick up a local SIM card. And that's why I got the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Like I'll repeat it again, is because it has an actual physical SIM card slot. So I want to be able to put that card in there. And I actually freed up the physical SIM card slot by programming my two numbers into eSIMs. Michael Warito, hey everyone, I'm testing Holify for when going to Europe. It's great since I can stream 4K without any issues. Yeah, Michael. Also, Blaine, I don't know if you have eSIM capabilities in your phone too. What we also did in Guatemala, believe it or not, I actually was trying out the Holify SIM card. Airlo. I actually used Airlo. I actually used Holify and Merida, but those are prepaid where you can just go. It's an application, you download it, and you tell what country you're going to be in. You buy a week's worth of data, but it's data only. Now, when you put in a local SIM card, you actually have a local phone number. I didn't use the local phone number from the Guatemala because that was a data only SIM. I actually ordered a data only SIM because it was cheaper than with a phone number. But these data only SIMs, I actually tried it out in Guatemala and it works. So that's another, it's a little bit more expensive because you're going to be paying $20 or $30, but those data only SIMs, it'll actually program the eSIM into your, when you buy the SIM and everything, instead of having to go into a store. So that's a good idea, Michael. And I also have used it before. I also used, well, when I was in Merida, I used Holofly for my iPad, actually. So, well, let me see. Tom's got something interesting to say here. To Ernie and everyone, just a reminder of what it is like living here in the U.S. Last Sunday, taking the train home from New York City, got pummeled in the face by some low life for no reason, minding my own biz. Yeah, it's you know what, Tom, it's getting it's getting a little bit harder there in the United States. It's getting polarized, a lot of violence, all sorts of stuff. Ernie, what can you tell me about Lo de Marcos, just north of Puerto Vallarta, next to Sayulita? I hear it's a quaint, small little town and very inexpensive. Your thoughts? Actually, I'm not very familiar with Lo de Marcos, that area, Sayulita, Puerto Vallarta, that area. I know that there's a lot of little towns around that area that are really neat to visit and also can be a little bit more affordable than Vallarta. So I don't know. I couldn't give you a comment because I haven't been there. So let's go ahead, and I know that well, we're still on the Aerolos. Holofy is better though, slightly pressure. One thing I noticed, Michael, I know that you're making a comment about the Aerolo. That Aerolo is the first one because I was most popular, I guess, or most known. But what I did notice, I think there's one. I have several apps on my phone: Aerolo, Holofy, and another one called Nomad and Saily. Saily's the same people that put on the NordVPN. It's owned by the same company. What I did notice, what you do have to look at, what I did have to look at, like for example in Merida, is what companies they have contracts with. They usually, you'll say Mexico and it'll say Telcel, well, or AT&T or Movistar. Like for example, I think Nomad is only Movistar, those things. So you do need to look at who you're going to be roaming with. That's why I like getting a local SIM card, because what we did with our guide or our taxi driver, when we get onto the taxi, and the taxi is, hey, what's the best cell phone service here? And then they'll say, oh, because like for example, in Guatemala it was Tim and Claro, and supposedly, but I had when I bought the SIM card with Aerolo, it was Tim, and I got a plan with Claro, so I kind of covered myself no matter which way. But I couldn't tell you which one was better, but that's another advantage to actually doing it there on the spot. So this country has become a violent, disgusting place to be from and live in. Can't wait to get out of this S-hole and move permanently to Mexico, where people are decent, kind, and law-abiding. Yeah, Tom, it's a lot different world down here. It's even gotten to the point where not even the violence, but all the political back and forth. And I've even got, like I said, one of the things that that really gets me is that what I see in all of that stuff is, for example, I have a YouTube feed, and all I'm getting, I clicked on some videos, and they were clickbait, Trump messes up. Trump does this. Trump gets so I clicked on it, and now all I get is how Trump this, how Trump that, and how Trump messed up this, how much, and I'm tired. I mean, because it's the same stuff being repeated over and over again. It's nothing new. It's no new news. They've mentioned the letter that Scheinbaum sent to President Trump like 50 million times, but they've reworded it. But they always keep on putting these YouTube videos like it's something new, and both sides. I'm not trying to defend Trump, but what I'm saying is that that's all I'm hearing. And then you go up into a conservative is, oh, you guys are sore losers and blah 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 blah. I'm just tired of it, and I'm doing my best to try to click on videos on my YouTube feed because, as a matter of fact, we have some friends here that said that right before the election they quit watching TV or any kind of news. It's just getting really bad, and it's getting polarized on both sides. I'm not taking sides here. So, Fred, do expats buy Mexico health insurance? Yes, I actually have a Mexican health insurance policy. If that helps you, I also have U.S. insurance, but I got that insurance through my retirement with my federal retirement. I use the U.S. insurance a little bit more because the deductible, I think I got like a $4,000 deductible. I usually keep the Mexican insurance for more like for emergency, like if I have a heart attack. And actually, and you asking how much is it? It varies. We pay, and here's the thing, it goes up with age. And it gets very, very expensive as you get older. But I think we're paying between the both of us like $8,000, like $400, $500 between both my wife and I. And it does go up every year because you get older. And also they don't cover pre-existing conditions. And you pick a deductible, and the deductible is based on, and also you pick like a network of hospitals, not a network of hospitals. It's more expensive. Like, for example, if you want the deluxe plan where you can walk into any hospital, it's a lot more. I have like more of a regional plan where certain hospitals are covered, so they have to take me to certain hospitals. And I use the U.S. insurance. It's by reimbursement, but for little things like going and getting an MRI, what Mexican health insurance is good for is if you need an operation, you pay your $4,000 up front and you get your operation. That's like my deductible right now. But here's the thing. Let's say it's an operation for my heart. Every subsequent operation on my heart, every heart condition after that is covered. But like, for example, I have an issue with my heart right now that's just being monitored. And I have to do a $300 stress test every year. Okay, I can't really put that on my Mexican insurance because I'll never hit the deductible. And so I actually put it on my U.S. insurance, and they reimburse me up to 90%. But my U.S. insurance actually covers overseas, living overseas. So I hope that answers your question. But it can... I'll give you an example of my in-laws. They have a very good, but it was getting up to $15,000, like close to $800 a month for each one of them. Now that they're in their 80s and 70s and stuff like that, so it gets expensive. And then also there's a cutoff as far as age when you can apply. Different insurance companies cut off the age where you're even if you qualify to apply. So hope that helps. I was just saying to a friend today that I can't wait to get to Mexico for the peace and quiet, and I meant all the political noise. I can't wait. Yeah, we love it here, and we love not having to hear the political. But you know what? The political, Stephanie, unfortunately, the political noise reaches all the way down here. There isn't a day that we don't go by and read some type of crazy news article about how they're going to get rid of the Department of Education and how they're going to do this. And depending on who you read it from, it's a different take. One One article, maybe the world's going to fall apart because the Department of Education no longer exists. And the other side is we need reforms and blah, 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 depending on whether it's conservative or whatever. But I'm just so tired of it. I'm tired of listening to both sides. I hate to see it. So, so let's get into banking in Mexico. I got a little bit off topic, but Blaine had a question, and I told everybody if you, excuse me, if you had a question, to put it in the comments before I came on, and I would answer that at the beginning. So that's why I did that. No, that's fine, Tom. That's fine. Here's the thing about my Ask Me Anything in Mexico. I'm willing to answer any questions, just like Fred had a question about insurance. The only reason why I'm doing this stuff about the topic of like banking in Mexico, last week was cell service. Maybe next week's going to be the requirements for, or even healthcare insurance. I can even go over that. The requirements for residency. I may be going into that maybe next week. But the reason why I do this subject thing is what I've noticed is if I'm not on a subject, it's really great. We have great conversations. But about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, not this last one, but the one before that, it got to the point where, I even got in an argument. A long-term viewer that's probably no longer a viewer anymore because I kind of got into an argument with him about Trump and all of that stuff, and it got a little way off base. And then another thing too is I want to kind of keep it on a certain track so we don't get, as a matter of fact, that we don't get caught up in all of the political noise, to be honest with you. So, and like Gringos R Us says here, you only hear noise when you listen for it. That is the beauty of Mexico. Harder even still to hear it. Exactly. And that's why I want to try to keep the political noise down. Yes. And Stephanie, you're right. It's hard to avoid it there. Unfortunately, the news media, it's all over I can't even get onto YouTube right now without hearing some type of a scandal with Trump's new cabinet or scandal with, I just clicked on the ones that seem sensational one time, and next thing you know, I'm being flooded with it. So even being here in Mexico, it's hard to stay away from it. So let's get to banking. The reason why I want to discuss banking, I have discussed banking a little bit, but things have been changing. Things have changed. But I actually mentioned this of what are the actual benefits of having a bank account here in Mexico. Here's your options. I'm going to tell you right now as an expat. The first option, I got something in my teeth that's bothering me, but I apologize. I was eating popcorn earlier, and I think that's what got me. But the first option you're going to have is to use your U.S. debit cards, U.S. credit cards, take money out of the ATM. The best solution for that that I found is to find, there's several banks. I have a bank, Plains Capital out of Texas, that I do banking with that doesn't charge on ATM fees or international transaction fees. I believe if you have a Capital One account, they don't charge fees. And the other one that's really, really super popular here with amongst expats are Charles Schwab accounts. They don't charge international transaction fees, and they don't charge ATM fees. So we're going to discuss that option. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? The first advantage to that option is that you don't have to go out and get a Mexican bank account. You can use your debit card. You can use it to charge things. You can use it for groceries. I have a Charles Schwab card, and I have an allotment that's sent to my Charles Schwab card, and I actually do my grocery shopping with it. You can go out, if you need cash, you can go to the ATM, you can take out the cash. But here's the disadvantage to this. Sometimes you're going to need a Mexican credit card or debit card to get things done here in Mexico. They won't accept certain places. For example, I'll even give you the perfect example. CFE. You will not, at up until recently that we tried to use a U.S. debit card. If you go to a CFE terminal and try to pay your electric bill in the little ATM that CFE has, they won't allow you to use U.S. credit cards. It won't work. Or a U.S. debit card. Many people say, no problem. I'll just go to the ATM. I'll just take out my 3,000 pesos to pay my bill, or 200 pesos or 500 pesos, and I'll just go pay it in cash at the OXXO, which isn't an option. But you also got to remember, I have to go. Hey, Severino, how's it going? The option there with me is my closest ATM closest to me is maybe 6 kilometers from here. And what if I need to pay cash, take money out, and then go back and pay my electric bill at the OXXO? It's a little bit of an inconvenience if that makes any kind of sense. Okay, so yes, Fred, Visa. You're asking, isn't Visa international? Yes, it is, Fred. But there's certain visas or certain MasterCards that are issued here in Mexico. Like, for example, I have a BBVA card. There's certain things you cannot use a foreign credit card for. As a matter of fact, I know some people get the Wise card, and they've had issues before using the Wise card at certain places. But I'll tell you what, Fred, it's even though Visa is international for making purchases and everything else, most of these services that you need a local debit card or a local credit card, most of these instances are government services, government offices. That's where you need it. Now, does my credit card, U.S. credit card, work in 90% of places? 98%, maybe 99%. Yes, it does. Okay, so I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but what I'm trying to tell you is there are certain things that you will need a Mexican card. And that's very few and far between. So that's the disadvantage of having just one U.S. account and everything else. Now, there's another disadvantage to having the U.S. card is that here in Mexico, we have a system within banks, okay? And this system, you can transfer money to each other, sort of like Cash App or Zelle. I don't know, Vimo is the other one, I believe, in the United States, where, hey, I'll Cash App you $50, okay? So you Cash App $50, and you basically, and it doesn't matter what the other person has. They just give you their debit card. You enter their debit card into your phone application. You say, transfer this guy 500 pesos. And this is very common. What you'll find is they'll say, when you walk into a place, and actually even to pay for your meal at a restaurant, sometimes you'll say, do you accept credit cards? And they'll say, no, cash only or transferencia. Transferencia is bank transfer, which means basically eat, we'll send you the bill, and you cash app us the money. But the system is already built into your banking app. So you can actually send money to each other. People pay their rent. Yeah, just send me a transferencia, and you transfer the money with your rent you transfer the rent money straight to your landlord. You don't have to go pay him cash. You don't have to take money out. You don't have to worry about having a credit card, or they don't take credit cards. Maybe they want, or you don't write a check to them. So this is a way of getting money to another. And this is very common with workers. For example, housekeepers, they'll say, transfer me the money. Either give me cash or transfer me the money. How many times am I here and we have the housekeeper come in, and the housekeeper comes in and says, okay, thank you very much. Okay, how much do we owe you? 600 pesos or 500 pesos. Okay, I don't have the cash. Get on my phone, transfer you the money. That's the advantage to having a U.S. bank account. Okay, now here's a Mexican bank account. I'm sorry. Now here's the advantage. Another advantage of having Charles Schwab account or a bank that doesn't charge international transaction fees is you don't have to worry about getting the money to the Mexican bank, right? I mean, you just pay with your credit card or you take cash out of the, and here's the thing. I'm not saying that, you know what, maybe I'm lazy. Hey, thank you, Enrique, for subscribing. Maybe I'm lazy and not wanting to go to the ATM, but hey, maybe you have all the time in the world, and maybe it's a great walk to the ATM machine. I go get my morning walk in, going to my ATM machine, and you get your money out. So it's all based on what's most convenient for you, but I'm just telling you what the advantages or disadvantages are. But one of the advantages of having a U.S. account and just taking the money out and using your debit card and credit card is you don't have to worry about getting the money here to Mexico, right? You just take the money out when you're here. If you have a Mexican bank account, you have to use a money transfer service, kind of like which I use, Wise, which is TransferWise, and they do charge you a fee, and then also, but you did get decent exchange rates. So, and then you have to get on the app and transfer the money and all of that stuff. So there is a process there. So that's where we're at with. Does anybody have it? Let me before I go into Mexican banking. If anybody has any other question, I'm also going to go over. I'm looking at the chat here, and I'm seeing that some people have some questions about the Charles Schwab and stuff like that. So I'm going to answer those questions, and then we're going to move on to Mexican bank accounts. So let's see here. Okay, Silverino says, hey, if we go digital bank currency, how can you pay rent? Actually, Silverino, and if there is some type of digital currency that starts to become more popular than cash, I'll tell you what, having a Mexican bank account is going to be key. Why? Because if you get the digital currency value transferred into your Mexican bank account, then you can send a transferencia to your landlord. And that's what a lot of people do. They send transferencias to pay their rent. And you just go onto the app and transfer the money. Oh, wow. Gringos R Us encounter businesses that only accept Mexican credit cards. Actually, Gringos R Us, my encounter has always been with government services, not just businesses, but I'm not surprised. Okay, where I bank in the U.S., they are overly vigilant in checking your ATM, debit card, and credit card transaction, which is great, but don't want them to put hold on any, even though I advise them. Actually, Tom, I will tell you that I haven't had a problem. Now with Charles Schwab, I had to go into the app because of when I first started trying to use it, they were denying and I called up and they were like, no, you have to put a travel notice. And I did in the app, and then I actually put the maximum 2 years or 3 years, and I have to go back and do it over again. But what I've noticed with my other bank, for example, Plains Capital, Wells Fargo, and this goes back to my cell phone service, why it's important to keep a U.S. number. That's another thing with keeping your Charles Schwab. You're going to have to keep a U.S. phone number for two-factor authentication. But what always happens, I have Plains Capital, of course, and I have another bank. When I do get those every once in a while, sorry, denied. 2 minutes late, not even 30 seconds later, I get a text message. Was this you that made this? Usually the fraud departments are pretty good about that. I just say yes. And then okay, you can, and actually I get a text message back, wait 1 minute and you can start using your card again. And then what I'll usually do is, I have like three bank accounts. One I inherited from my late father, but um, I just pull out another debit card. But if I didn't have that other debit card to pull out or credit card to say I'll just pay with this for the sake of time, I literally within 5 minutes I can use my credit card again. I mean, by the time they text me, by the time I say okay, but I have had instances where I've said, "Oh, wait a second, I just got a text message. Hold on, let me. Okay, wait like 30 more seconds. Okay, let me use my card again." I have had that happen with me where I've had to use where I wanted to use that card. But I'll tell you what, most of the banks in the U.S. are pretty good, especially their fraud departments are pretty good about sending you emails. And then I have my email going straight to my phone, so I get an email and a text. And of course, since I answer it right away. So I haven't had any issues where it doesn't work per se. So hope that hope that answers your question, Tom. But I always advise people to get a Mexican bank account. Okay, when you purchased Starlink in Mexico, you needed a Mexican account. Stephanie, I wouldn't be surprised because Starlink does things by area. Like, for example, if you sign up for your Starlink in the United States, but you have the roaming plan and you come to Mexico, that's okay. There's a lot of people that do it for 6 months or whatever and take it back and forth. Well, if they find out or you start living in a different country, you have to pay the rates from that country. So probably that's why they made you use a Mexican credit card. Good. Okay. How is HSBC for banking? Also, is it safe to use my Charles Schwab debit card at restaurants and stores since it's linked to my main bank account in the U.S.? I haven't had any issues, Kat. I use the Charles Schwab card all the time. HSBC, I haven't used HSBC here. The only thing I've used HSBC here for is pulling out money. One of the supermarkets we go to has an HSBC ATM, and I would actually say the HSBC ATM is the most the reliable ones are HSBC and BBVA. BBVA is probably the highest ATM fees, but if you're getting your ATM fees back through Charles Schwab, that shouldn't make a difference. But I've noticed that I've gotten very lucky or been very lucky. The only thing that HSBC tends to do, but you just decline the exchange rate, they're really bad on their exchange rate what they try to offer you. But as long as you decline the exchange rate, usually you're supposed to get the exchange rate for that time. But you shouldn't have any problems. Charles Schwab is, like I said, I use it all the time. Actually, I use it's even getting to the point where I'm using it on Apple Pay. Apple Pay probably up to a year ago wasn't, or if you even said, can you take Apple Pay, they'll look at you kind of like, and they'll still look at you weird. But most of the major places that I'm shopping now have the contactless, and I just use the Apple Pay with my Charles Schwab card and haven't had a problem. Haven't had a problem with any kind of fraud at all. So I hope that answers your question. Muy name. Any Mexican bank account that pays decent interest rate on the savings account. What you're going to notice here in Mexico, there's different kinds of savings account. There, for example, at Santander, not in at BBVA where I bank, they have this thing called apartados where you can take your money and divide it, but they don't pay you interest. It's not like it is in the United States where you get these interest-bearing accounts. There are some banks, they're investment banks, kind of like Acnivar. There's a couple of other investment banks where you can set up savings accounts or even a money market account kind of equivalents where you gain interest. Your interest is going to be higher here in Mexico on any kind of savings account, government bond. That's going to be higher here in Mexico than it is in the United States. The reason for that is interest rates here are a lot higher than they are in the United States. That's why Mexico's been able to control their inflation. That's why you raise interest rates when you have inflation. That's why in the United States, the Fed rose interest rates to try to control the inflation. But when you raise interest rates, your prime lending rates, your interest rate that you get paid back on, like traditional government bonds. For example, government bonds here are at 10%, whereas in the United States, probably before the interest rates start going down, they're going to be at 6%, 7%. So you're going to get a better but it's not like the US where I have all my accounts mixed into one, not one, but one account, but like my savings and everything else. What I have in my BBVA account is the only a thing that I can do. Uh, Here, if you want to put money away like savings, it has to be more like stocks, bonds, that type of thing. But there are, like Acnivar actually does an interest bearing savings accounts. And actually, one of my friends has like a money market account where it's a checking, savings, and gains interest type thing. But you have to go to a particular bank to do that. And when we went to, actually, when we sold our house in Monterrey, we were asking the bank, hey, because we wanted to put it away and make some interest because they're still paying us. And they were like, no, you can put what they call an apartado. You can set money aside, but we're not going to pay you interest. So that's my experience with it. Okay. Charles Schwab, ATM and Capital One for all. And Capital One, okay. Hopefully you can hear me now. I had to put on my AirPods. I'm having an audio issue. Um, Let me see here. Okay. I can't bring up some of the. Hold on just one second. Am I live here? Okay, I'm still live. Okay. Jim, okay. Let me let me know when you guys start picking my audio up again. Okay. I had an issue with my audio interface. I'm on my AirPods. um, okay. The reason why I was probably buffering is because there was a period of a little bit of time that my audio went out. I don't know why. I'm gonna have to look into it. But I lost my audio interface with my I lost my audio interface with my okay. I lost my I apologize. I lost my audio interface with my my microphone. So I'm on my AirPods right now. So let's get back to the let me see what we have here. I think you were saying I'm trying to catch up on the comments here. I apologize. Um, so let me see. And Tim, you actually, immigration, you used to have to do your pagos de derechos um, at the BBVA, that go straight to the BBVA. But now at immigration, they do accept credit cards and debit cards. So I Googled today, you're not allowed to have a Wise card if you're living in Mexico. If you already have one, once it expires, they won't be able to get another one because they don't issue in Mexico. Yeah, actually, Kat, there are some issues with the Wise card.
I do agree with you. Um, what you Googled was correct. I do know that Intercam is not accepting what, and I can't stand this on expat Facebook groups. People say, "Oh, well, why is just transfer that?" They can't deny your money. Yes, they can't deny the money, but once you make one or two transfers, they can close down your bank account. Uh, don't believe anybody telling you that, oh well, that intercam can't do anything. That's just them saying so. No, they can't. The problem that Wise has run into not too long ago, and I hope you all are hearing me just fine, um, is that the problem that Wise has right now is they have to stay compliant with banking regulations and that type of stuff. And also Intercam has to take compliant with banking regulations. And that's one of the things I'm going to go into right now about banking in Mexico. But the problem that you're having, or that you're going to have, is that um, because of that, those banking regulations getting stricter here in Mexico, that's why the Wise card pretty much, actually, I've even heard it doesn't work at some places too. So hopefully what is going on or whatever. uh, but that's what's going on with the Wise card um, is that the banking regulations have kind of caught up to Wise and also to several banks. And I'm going to go into Intercam right now. Um, I wouldn't even, to be honest with you, I know a lot of people are big fans of Intercam, but there are some disadvantages to Intercam here in Mexico. Um, Cat. So I'm just about to open my HSBC account. Should I use my Wise card to transfer to it, or will they will it be closed down? No, you can HSBC, BBVA. I've been using Wise. The reason why Intercam's not working, here's I'm going to go into Intercam, but Intercam has got some serious issues right now here in Mexico, and they kind of got away with not following banking regulations here in Mexico um, for a while because they're kind of like, we're an international bank. We don't answer to Mexico. We answer to our headquarters back in wherever, and you can't tell us what to do. And they've been getting hit with, as a matter of fact, at one point, you could open an Intercam bank account with just your passport. You didn't, and a FMM. You didn't even need residency. Now you do. Intercam is getting the problem that Intercam is having now is that the banking regulations, for example, having an RFC. Anybody that tells you that you don't need an RFC, and we're going to go into that. Anybody that tells you that you don't need an RFC for a bank account is not right. Um, and I'll tell you what the ramifications of not having an RFC are, and that goes into the bank account part. But so what you do is, because of these regulations, they're telling Intercam you need to comply. So Intercam is doing a lot of things to change that. Now you do need an RFC. Now, the thing with the RFC is it, there are some exceptions in a sense, but those exceptions are little by little going away because everybody's already getting an RFC and there's no reason not to have one. So that's one of the things that Intercam is going through it right now. And I would, to be honest with you, I wouldn't bank with Intercam, uh, although I'm almost sure that they'll resolve their problems. They've been here in Mexico for years, and they're not going anywhere. And they got great customer service, from what I understand. And a lot of people use them because you can actually cash checks from Canada and the U.S. there. They take, and that's one of the reasons. Like, you go into BBVA and try to cash a U.S. check, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. The reason why Intercam can do it is because they're an international bank. They're not a bank here in Mexico. BBVA or HSBC, which has, or Banamex, which has Citibank in the United States, right? I've explained this before. They're totally separate entities. BBVA here is a Mexican bank registered with the Mexican banking. Intercam isn't. It's an international bank that has gotten away without registering and complying with banking regulations, which is coming to an end. So, Jim, that's a good question. I've never used XE transfers. I use the app and I see that they give good exchange rates. So I don't know, to be honest with you, why many people don't use it. I don't have any personal use use of it or use case scenarios. But when I do recommend transfer services, because of the ones that give the best rate and everything else, I always recommend TransferWise, and I recommend XE Currency. Remitly is another one that everybody's had really good good luck with. Um, I use a Wise card at restaurants and grocery stores without any issues. Um, Here's the thing: I haven't had any issues. I've never transferred from a card, but I do know Wise has these accounts, and you can transfer them to your U.S. dollar account, and then you can have a U.S. dollar account there. I transferred straight from my bank in the U.S. straight to Mexico, and it only takes a couple of minutes. Um, and I don't use a Wise card to transfer money. I use just I don't have a Wise card, to be honest with you, Rick Joyce. We tried to use our Wise card at three different bank ATMs and were rejected. Called Wise and they said it was not on their end. Um, I probably for whatever reason, and I don't know what's going on with Wise, but I do know that the Wise card doesn't really work as well as it used to. And that's why also say to try to stay away from these fintech companies like the Dollar app, Kobe AI, that offer debit cards or credit cards, secured credit cards based on what your balance is in there. Um, because not only do you put your money at risk because it's not insured, but also this can happen where the card won't work. And no matter how much they want to tell you that the card's going to work, and it's a Visa card, just like Fred was, I think Fred Ernst was saying, "Hey, isn't Visa International?" Ernest, and yes, it is. So you just assume it's a Visa card, so it should go through, right? But look at the Wise card. People, there's things in Mexico you can't use. You have to have a Mexican credit card. So um, I wouldn't doubt the Wise card getting. And here's the thing: Wise might say it's not on their end, but it it may not be on their end. It may be the Mexican banks just don't want to take it, or the ATM machines don't want to take it for whatever reason. Uh, so that's what's probably going on, Rick. So let me get on to the topic of opening a Mexican bank account. What are you going to need? You're going to need your corp, you're going to need your passport, you're going to need your residency. Some will not let you if you're a temporary resident, but they should let you. And you're going to need an RFC. Okay. So, what's an RFC? An RFC is equivalent to your Social Security. Okay. Mexico has two identifying numbers, their corp and your RFC. The corp and the RFC put together make your social security number. They're two different numbers. And actually, the two numbers are tied to each other, kind of, sort of. Um, so you're going to need a corp. You're going to need your passport and your RFC and your residency card. Um, Now you need to be a resident to open a bank account in Mexico, either a permanent resident or a temporary resident. I do know two two travelers in Mexico, Mark and Paulette. They had some issues with one of their banks because one of them had temporary residency, and they were saying some banks will say no, we don't give to temporary residency because they don't want the hassle. But technically, if you have residency and have an RC, um, then you should be able to get a bank account. What are the advantages to having a bank account here? Just like I said, transferring money for services. As a matter of fact, my brother in law was here just recently. We went to a little hole in the wall restaurant. And we said, "Do you take credit cards?" No, we don't have a credit card terminal, but we take transfers. Um, I'll give you my neighborhood. Today, we have people in my neighborhood that sell hamburgers, food, pastries, stuff like that. We have a WhatsApp group for the whole, not this neighborhood, but the whole complex. And um, what happened? Uh, they bring us the hamburgers. We don't have no cash on us. Okay, we'll send you a transfer, money transfer, and you just send it in the app. Now, what? Oh, and the other thing you're going to need to use that app and use that great money transfer thing. Okay, what you're going to need for that app is you're going to need a Mexican phone number. So it goes back to the cell phone service. So you're going to need a Mexican phone number so you can activate the app. So that's one of the disadvantages if you don't want to have a Mexican phone number of having a Mexican bank account. The other disadvantage of is the other disadvantage is that you have to get that money from the US account to the Mexican account. Now, Social Security recipients, actually did a video on this. Can you have your Social Security deposited into a Mexican bank account? Yes, you can. Uh, there's a whole process to do that, but you can actually have it, your Social Security put into your Mexican bank and get direct deposited into your Mexican bank account. So, Fred, yes, they do have a scoring system and a credit reporting system, uh, but the interest rates on credit cards are outlandish here. We're not talking about 20 cents, 20% a year. We're talking about 20% a month. You don't really want a Mexican credit card here. Uh, Interest rates here are very high. Yes, you can get good interest rates on savings accounts and the like, but the problem you're going to have is you might be able to get great interest rates, but the problem you're going to have um, the earning interest rates on savings account. But the reason why the interest rates on the savings accounts are so high is because the lending rates are so high. So normally you don't have mortgages here, car loans. You don't have car loans here. You do, but you're usually paying half on 50% up a down payment, plus you're paying a outrageous or maybe 20% interest rate on the car payments. Same thing with mortgages here. The interest rates are very high. So really credit, one thing, Fred, you're going to find about Mexico is people don't work on credit. People work on cash. It's all about cash. Most people own their homes here. They don't carry mortgages. They buy their houses outright in cash. Most people, their car, they don't have a car loan. They pay their car in cash. You know, the one thing that's really funny, and we joke around about this because I was in Cancun the other day, a couple of years back, not the other day, a couple of years back, and we got into the van with a couple of Americans. And one guy was sitting there going, "Oh, I got three Harleys and I got a BMW and I got $1 million house." And come to find out, he was bragging about all this stuff that he had. And somebody was talking to him and goes, "Well, what's your mortgage rate on your house?" "Oh, I got a great rate of 2%. And and how did you finance the motorcycles? Because Harley, you know, when you finance a motorcycle, oh no, I got a great because I have three Harleys. I got a great price on the interest rate. And this guy was bragging about how he had money, but really all the stuff that he owned, the bank owned it. He doesn't own it. He has loaned on all of that stuff he bragged about him having. He has loans on it. He doesn't own it outright. If you talk to a Mexican that owns a BMW here, you know they have money because they paid outright $100,000 in cash for their car. They don't need to get a loan. So it's very different here the way Mexico works. Most people work on credit, and that's one of the biggest hurdles that I see a lot of Americans. I don't know about Canadians, but I see a lot of Americans go through those hurdles. The first thing they want to know is what's the interest rate on credit cards? What's the interest rate on I want to go out and finance my car. I want to get 0% down and zero down and 5% interest or 2% interest. That doesn't work here. Um, It's because the economies work totally different. Cash is king here. Um, and people here, you'll find, I'll give you a perfect example. I just bought my iPhone 16 and I'm selling an iPhone 13. People, I was able to get a decent amount of money off of my iPhone 13 because people are several generations behind on the iPhone because buying one cash compared to in the United States, everybody has an iPhone. Why? Because they're subsidized by AT&T, by Verizon. You're on a monthly plan. Uh, Apple finances it for 2 years, no interest, so you can afford that monthly payment. Here, people can't afford that, so they have to buy the cheaper model, the model that's 3 years old or 4 years old, and it still goes for a premium at that. So that's one thing about credit here that's very different than the United States. Yes, Laura, you did bring up a good point. You also need a comprobante de domicilio. Okay, a comprobante de domicilio is your proof of residence here in Mexico. Now, here's the interesting thing about the comprobante de domicilio as different than the United States. When they tell you in the United States, we need a utility bill, blah, 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 it has to be under your name. Here in Mexico, a comprobante de domicilio, like for example, when I first moved here, I didn't have any utility bill under my name or anything else. We were living with my in-laws for even a small amount of time. So I just used my in-laws' address. I grabbed their utility bill, and it doesn't have my name on it. It has my mother-in-law's name on it. But see, here's the thing about the comprobante. They understand that people live together, people live with their parents, people live with this. So technically, the bill's not going to be under your name. Here's the catch to the utility bill: it has to be an original. It can't be a copy. Because if you take a copy, they're going to say, "Oh, you just copied your friend's utility bill. You need an original." So, um, so that's one of the things, Laura, that you will need. You also need a comprobante de domicilio. A comprobante de domicilio, you're going to need it for a lot of things here, even for your RFC. Um, so just remember, when someone asks you for a comprobante de domicilio, it's usually a utility bill, water bill, electric bill, not necessarily in your name. I know a lot of people that usually use like they're renting and they use their landlord's utility bill as a comprobante de domicilio. Curious to know if anyone had trouble using traveling mailbacks or something like that with their U.S. bank account. Definitely want to keep banking here in the U.S. along with keeping both phones. Tom, I here's the thing on the traveling mailbox. I'm not sure. I have seen some feedback where people were having issues with traveling type mailboxes. Um, where the banks are kind of cracking down that you kind of got to live here in the United States. So one of the things they were doing is cracking down on that. I don't know about traveling mailbox. I do know that several people have found solution. I don't know about the Telcel bill, Tom. I know you actually need a comprobante to get Telcel. Um, I I'm not sure. Usually it's an electric bill or a water bill, Tom, and some places are pretty strict about it as far as comprobante. Um, so let's see here. Um, okay, my home country is Canada, like the United States, and buys on debt. Exactly. I didn't know how Canada. I'm almost sure Canada is more similar to the United States. Even when I was working in law enforcement, a lot of our stuff kind of meshed together because their system of doing things was very similar. I'm not talking about the justice system, but the system of doing things. I wouldn't doubt if it. Okay, Charles Schwab hasn't given you any issues with the traveling mailbox. I think the traveling mailbox is the one that's the most popular, and I haven't seen very many complaints about using that. A lot of people say that they work just fine. Uh, yeah, Henry. Hey, Henry, how's it going? Tom, you can use TravelMail anywhere in the world. They provide you with a mailbox address in the USA. Yeah, Henry, the only thing that I have heard is that some US bank, and I haven't, well, I haven't, I don't have that problem because my permanent address back in the United States is with family members. So, I mean, I even hold a driver's license to the point so that no one gives me a hard time, or I don't want to have any issues with taxes because my residence is based in Texas, and there's some states you actually have to look at this. There's some states that even if you live like, for example, Virginia. I'll give you an example of Virginia, and I actually did this. Um, Virginia taxes you worldwide, so I was taking off to Brazil. I was living in Virginia because I was working in DC, and I had to pay state taxes. Well, they were telling me in Virginia, you're going to need to, now that you go to Brazil, you're going to still need to pay Virginia state taxes. And I said, "Well, why?" Well, your residency, your last known residence is in Virginia. So what I did, believe it or not, in Texas, you have to move to Texas for 30 days to become a resident. I literally took 30 days off. I took a month off of work. I visited my parents in Texas. I changed my address, my driver's license, everything to Texas. I gave back my car plates back, got Texas plates, did everything in a month, and literally declared residency in Texas so I don't have to pay state income tax from Virginia. So you need to look into those things when you're moving to Mexico. I do know one person was talking about they live in a state that taxes you worldwide. They still consider you a resident of the state, even though you live outside the state. So that's what and Gringos R Us uses traveling mailboxes, the traveling mailbox. And I think traveling mail, the thing with, some in some states, even Texas is getting down on this. Um, for example, you can go to those mailbox places where you rent a mailbox, the private places, and it's like maybe in a strip mall, and the address is the strip mall address plus the suite number plus your mailbox number. And I do know that, like, for example, they're cracking down on that. You can't get a driver's license if you use that address. You can't use a PO box. You have to have a physical address that you're receiving mail at and you're living at. In Texas, it's a little bit more strict, and so you just need to look at that. I do know that the banks are supposedly getting a little bit more strict, but I haven't had any issues. But traveling mailbox seems to be the one. Uh, okay. They use brick and mortar addresses. Yeah, and as long as you shouldn't have any issues, that I've been seeing. Everybody talks about how great about it. Anytime, I've never heard of anytime mailbox, Rick. Uh, okay, you Gringos R Us started with Dakota Post, and they went to traveling. One clue on the banks is that we dropped the letters PMB from the address. Okay, so they don't see that it's from a traveling mailbox. Jesse, I have no idea, to be honest with you. I just knew about Virginia being a predatory. Virginia is what they call a predatory tax state. Uh, I know a lot of people from Virginia that left Virginia and, lived in Virginia because they were in DC for a little bit and got a tax bill 6 years later saying you still owe us taxes. And they had to actually go back and say, hey, I left, you know, and had to show a bunch of stuff and everything else. Virginia is very famous for that. I don't know which states do, um, but which states do require that. Most states that I'm aware of, if you live out of the country, they pretty much you don't live there anymore, and then you shouldn't be paying income taxes. But I do know Virginia for sure. I don't know of any other states. I don't know, and I don't know where you would find a list. Maybe ask ChatGPT, but or artificial intelligence. But I don't have a list. To be honest with you, Tom, I want to get a Mexican, but my parallel parking really sucks. Don't want to flunk it. LOL. Tom, the driver's test here in Mexico is different for different. I took it in Monterrey, Mexico. I had to take the written test literally in Spanish on a computer, and I was doing this and this because I was thinking in English and having to translate in my mind, and I passed it. And the driving part was pretty easy. Now here in San Miguel de Allende, and I don't know if it's because there's more Americans here. Um, Here in San Miguel de Allende, when I'm familiar with is that if you already have a driver's license, like for example from the United States or from Canada or whatever, they just take your driver's license and you're good because you know how to drive, uh, and they accept it. And then all you have to do, I think, is get a medical. There's a little doctor off to the side. You get a medical, and you get your driver's license. Um, but I did my driver's license way back when I first moved, and that was in Monterrey, and I had to go through the whole like the driving test. I had to parallel park, but it was kind of more a formality, to be honest with you. I was just joking around with the person that was giving me the test the whole time, and then they were basically saying, "Oh, by the way, here in Mexico, you do this, don't do that. Oh, you didn't come to a full stop. Yeah, you're supposed to come to the full stop, but like they just, oh, you passed. So I didn't have a hard time. So um, okay, Kat, you have traveling mailbox. Traveling mailbox seems to be the one that everybody tells me about, that everybody loves. Me. So I hope that kind of squares away why you would want a Mexican bank account or why you might not want a Mexican bank account. For example, the RFC thing. Here's a couple of caveats. Some banks or some branches will accept you without an RFC, but here's the reason why, and here's something you need to be careful with. Okay. And that's what I say. I hate this on these the expat Facebook group. I didn't use an RFC, and I'm not going to get an RFC, and I have a bank account. They let me have a bank account. Well, when did you get your bank account? 3 years ago. Trust me. Eventually, the bank's going to say, "Give us your RFC," or they'll freeze your funds. Okay, it's a federal law. Everybody has to have an RFC. Okay, that's the way it actually, how many years ago? A couple of years ago, that was a requirement. The reason why some banks are still letting you get away without an RFC, yeah, actually, Ron Feldman here Ron has a answer to the driver's license, but the RFC wasn't a requirement 3 years ago. The other thing too is SAT hadn't caught up with all the RFCs. So how could the government tell you you need an RFC to get a bank account, but oh, but you have to wait another year to get your RFC because we're backed up in issuing them. So the government has kind of been giving grace periods to like say, okay, catch up, catch up, catch up. The problem is, and the banks have been giving grace, but it's getting stricter. The banks were saying, okay, we'll open your bank account without an RFC, but eventually the law says that you have to have it. So eventually, once everything catches up and everything in the system gets going perfectly, then the banks are going to be like, you need to give. And as a matter of fact, the banks have been bothering. They were bothering me for my RFC, and then I didn't give it to them, and then they basically wouldn't give me a credit card until I did it. But I know some people have gotten their accounts frozen, literally frozen. In other words, one day to the next, you can't use your money's frozen until you give them their RFC, and that's what's going to end up happening with all of these people that say, "Oh, I don't need an RFC, and I'm not going to give my personal information. I'm not going to get an RFC." Well, you don't have to worry about. First of all, the Mexican government, if you have residency, the Mexican government has your personal information. They have everything about you, right? They take biometrics electronically. So the Mexican government has your information. So what's the difference? And oh well, but if I get an RFC, I have to pay tax. No, you don't. You don't have to pay taxes. What people need to understand about an RFC, it's not about paying taxes. It's about conducting financial transactions. The reason for the RFC is, for example, you go to buy a car. Okay, the business that's selling you the car has to issue you a factura. That's the record that a sale took place so that that business can pay taxes. But they need to attach that transaction with a physical person. So that's why you have an RFC. So when you buy the car, they take your RFC and they take the other person's RFC. And you don't have to worry about paying taxes. Trust me, you're not going to get a visit by SAT saying you didn't pay taxes. Um, and this ridiculous idea that I don't want to give out my personal information to the Mexican government. If you live here and are in permanent or temporary residency, the Mexican government already has your information, by the way. So what difference does it make? The RFC is just the information that you gave the government when you did your residency. So, oh, Ron, when I got the GTO license years ago, I only had to do the vision test, but they kept my US driver's license. I had to get a duplicate when I went back for a visit to the US. Yeah, actually, Ron, I'm going to be in a different situation because I need to get my GTO license. I'm going to actually give him my Monterrey license. But yeah, that's what I've heard here in San Miguel. You don't, um, and actually, I don't even think one of my close friends showed him an international driver's license, and they took it, and they didn't take it away, but they just took it and said, "Here you go." So it all depends where you're at. And I know other places here in Mexico are that way, where you don't have to take a written test or anything like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you heard in Baja. Most of the probably in Puerto Vallarta, it's the same thing. I don't think I did it and Monterrey is not very. There's not a lot of people from foreigners that there's not a lot of foreigners that get driver's licenses here in Monterrey. Not here, but you have San Miguel, Puerto Vallarta, Baja. And you're going to find that they have less strict stuff. Stephanie, Luis wants me to get my license while I'm here this time since I don't speak Spanish. Ah, actually, Stephanie, here in San Miguel, you should be able to get your driver's license with your U.S. driver's license. The only thing they will make you do I think, Ron, where it's changed from the vision test when you did it years ago, is they're now requiring a medical, quote, quote, and it's the same thing as the I need to go to the doctor to get my prescription next to the pharmacy. From what I understand, and I haven't been to the driver's license office, there's a doctor right there that signs off your med. Oh, do you have any problems? No. Okay. But that's the only difference that you have to do, and you'll be fine. Fred, what's an RFC? I'll explain, and I kind of did a little bit ago. There's two identifying numbers that well, in the United, I like to compare it to the U.S. U.S. you have a social security number, right? Your social security numbers for everything. Your social security numbers for actually even voting. To register to vote. You use your social security number to pay taxes. You use your social security number as an ID number, right? To apply for any official ID. Here in Mexico, actually, I stand corrected. There's three ID numbers, okay? But one ID number of the three is reserved for Mexican citizens only. You have your INE number. Your INE is your INE, which is your voter registration number. You'll find that many people ask for your INE here. It's sort of like whatever. It's sort of like your social security number as an ID. Okay. Um, just think of it as your social security number using it as an ID, but it's your photo ID here in Mexico. But pretty much you need your INE for everything, unless you're a resident. If you're a resident, there's a number on the back of your card that takes the place of the INE. So you need that unique number. The second number is their CORP. Your CORP is kind of a population identification number. When you're born, Now they're going to start issuing RFCs when you're born. But when you're born, you're issued a corp number. That's your national ID number. That's kind of like the census number. And the corp is needed for different things, but it's not as important as your INE at all, or on your resident card. There's a number. But when you get a residency, you get a corp issued to you. Okay, when you're born, you get a corp issued to you. So you get a corp, and you have your corp, your INE, and then your last number is your RFC. Your RFC is your tax ID number. So see, so in the United States, you use your social security number for three different things, right? You use your social security number as an ID. You use your social security number um, for work or whatever that might be, and you use your social security number for taxes. Here in Mexico, that's all separated. So you use your social security number, not your RFC number, to pay taxes. But it's not just to pay taxes; it's to conduct financial stuff, transactions, large financial transactions. It's used for everything. For example, I'm not, and I don't want to go into the tax system here, but the way the tax system works is like deductions. For example, in the United States, you just fill out your income taxes and say, I spent $600 on medical expenses. I spent $1,000 on my business expenses. And you itemize it and you fill out your taxes, and then you just can't do that here in Mexico. If you want deductions for medical expenses, for all of that stuff, blah, 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 you get what they call a factura. You basically uh, do the financial transaction, but you have to have your RFC, and they have to charge your RFC, and that's how the tax authority says, "Oh, you're telling the truth. You did spend $600 on medical because I have this factura here that shows that you spent $600." There's a lot of fraud in that, though, but that's what you need the RFC for. So even if you're not on the tax paying end, you need it to conduct financial transaction. Now you need it to actually open up a bank account because, and here's the reason why, a lot of people had bank accounts and only did stuff in cash. And then they would go and deposit the cash in the bank account and use the bank, right? But they weren't paying taxes because nothing was reported. Nothing was done by factura. Well, now you put your money in the bank, they start seeing, banks start seeing, what do you call it? Uh, they start seeing patterns of financial transactions, and they can say, oh no, this person has a business, even though they're receiving cash. And that way they can track down the person to charge them taxes. Uh, Jesse, oh, actually, this happens a little bit more in investment banks. And this is why I also say use a bank, for example, BBVA, HSBC, Santander. I've heard bad and good things about it. I've stuck with HSBC, Banamex, and Santander, and those are probably the most expat friendly as far as. And they'll tell you that there is bank fraud. You're gonna find that it's hard to do some types of transactions here in Mexico because there's all these security features that are going on, and there's all sorts of security features that get messed up or whatever, that mess you up from doing easy transactions. Um, uh, and they said that what happens a lot of times is it's a bank employee that's embezzling money that'll transfer your money to other accounts and all of that stuff. But the big banks, most of them, number one, are insured. Number two, are a little bit more better with the security. So I haven't had not one single issue. I don't know who's telling you not to put money in the Mexican banks. Now, I do know I have seen horror stories where people's money disappeared, but where it really disappears for I can tell you from a Mexican perspective, from having family here, where it happens more is with investments, with like places like Acnivar. Acnivar's had some issues where bank employees have robbed the money, and it's not insured. Um, Now they do offer insured accounts, but there isn't bank insurance like FDIC. I should do a video on that. I did a little bit more research on it, and so your money is insured to a certain point here in Mexico. But I think that's a little bit more of a U.S. attitude of Mexico's third world. Don't put your money there. They're going to rob you. They're corrupt. Um, I wouldn't worry about it if you're banking with a major bank. I wouldn't. Now there are some of these investment banks that, oh, we have these savings accounts and these checking accounts and all. If it's not a major bank, I wouldn't. And I go with the worldwide ones. Banamex is Citibank, HSBC is HSBC, BBVA has, and Santander also is international. But I've heard a couple of things about Santander, just the customer service. And we went into the Santander one time to pay. You know, they give you a little receipt, and you have to pay, like deposit money in someone's account. And we went to pay, and we were very disheartened with the way they treat their customers, way they treated us. We had to wait for like an hour and a half, and they were letting people that came in right 10 minutes ago, and then they were like, "Well, we have a priority line for our own customer." Yeah, but you also have to fit into other people. You can't wait every if everybody's your customer, then you're never going to get to us. We had to actually complain. So I don't believe in Santander, to be honest with you, but I've had a personal experience with their customer service. I haven't had any experiences from people telling me anything bad, fraud wise, but customer service wise, I experienced it firsthand. Uh, Tom, actually, I just answered that right now. Most of your major banks are insured. Now you have to be careful with these investment banks because they're putting your money in this money market account, and it's not necessarily an insured account. Now, I do know that Acnivar does have legitimate insured accounts, but I don't think their investment accounts are insured. So you have to really be careful with that. Uh, oh, Blaine La Paz, yeah, you got your license just by Blaine. I do not have an RC, which I know I need to get. Any idea if they're backlogged with RC? Actually, Blaine, I don't think they are. If you go to my video with the RCs, um, I think I did like a walkthrough on how you get into the appointment system. Just go in there and get into the appointment system, and it should tell you how backlogged it was. I I did it when it was backlogged, and it only took me a couple. It was a couple of weeks. Um, but that was when that law just passed. It had just passed, and I'm not kidding you. The SAT office in Monterrey was like Grand Central Station. Uh, it was a mess, but I got it done pretty quickly. If you get yourself in the queue, you shouldn't have a problem. The other, I do know that there are some facilitators that'll do the RFC process for you. The only thing that you're going to have to do if you get a facilitator to do that is you're going to have to get your e-firma. You're going to have to still go into SAT to get it done. Um, and because these facilitators, what they do, some of them, what they do is they have accountants, like Mexican accountants, that'll get you your RFC, but they'll use like their business address for your address and all of this stuff. They'll set up your RFC, but then you get your RFC and you'll be like, why is my RFC out of Colima, Mexico? It's because that's where they have the thing. And for those that just need the number, oh well, you know, I don't care. But if you really want to be up and up and legal, then you have to change your RFC to where your current address is and everything else. Well, the only way to do that is either going in the office or signing up. So and I actually did it through a facilitator. So I can tell you that's what happened. I paid a couple of thousand pesos to have them get my RFC. When I got my constancia, and the other thing you're going to find out with the RFC is there's this little thing called a constancia. It's a page like your court, and it tells what your current status is they have your status as a taxpayer, and a lot of people will ask for your constancia. I need your most recent constancia, and actually the bank will ask for your most recent, and it has to be printed out within the last 3 months. Well, I got my constancia from this what do you call it, accountant, but it was out of I think it was Colima, Mexico. And so I'm like, okay, I need to change my address. Well, the only you have to go in. So I still had to go into SAT and get my e-firma. And then now I have my e-firma where I can go onto the onto the SAT website and print out my constancia. So that's one of the reasons why you want to do it through SAT. And I don't know what the backlog is right now. I don't think it's that bad, to be honest with you, because I think everything's these requirements of having RFC are getting more and more strict. And the reason why they're getting stricter is because not as many people need a break because they don't have one. And the reason why they don't have one is because of the backlog. Laura, our name is written in all capitals, then it indicates you, myself included, are a corporation that can sign contracts saying that you are authorized person to conduct any financial transaction. I I don't know what your is that to try to do something in lieu of the RFC, Laura? It says look at your debit cards, credit cards, they tiny script under the signature form on the check. It it is not a line. It states something like you are authorized person to make the yeah, I I see that. I have no idea in what terms are you talking, Laura? If it's the RFC that I've been talking about. Um, um, okay, Gringos or us. I know, Kat, you asked Gringos or us when I need a new credit card or swap card when they expire. Have you had any issues receiving them by FedEx or DHL? Uh, Kat, I would use DHL instead of FedEx. FedEx has a reputation for losing stuff, stealing stuff, all sorts of stuff here in Mexico. DHL, I have found, is a little bit more, is a little bit better. Um, I don't know about documents, but I haven't had any documents sent here. But you're talking about having the traveling mailbox forward you your cards. So let me see here. I'm getting ready. Actually, I don't know how long I was in when I lost my. Yes, Fred, DHL and UPS deliver in Mexico. So does FedEx. Uh, Matter of fact, I get Amazon packages delivered by DHL and UPS. I've gotten Amazon packages when it's not Amazon themselves. Well, it looks like I've gone way over because I don't know how long I was on there and I lost my audio. I'm definitely going to have to look into this audio problem and see what I think it's my Thunderbolt dock that's going bad. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here because I've been going. Oh wow, it's 8:30. Oh, about an hour and a half. Okay, so I'm good. But so it is in regards to not wanting to give personal info to a Mexican bank. They need it in order to hold the user accountable. Yes, and actually, Laura, um, the personal info. I mean, I understand that not giving personal info to the bank, but when I was talking about personal info, I was talking about getting an RFC, and many people are refusing to get it. I think it's the fear that when they give you your constancia, um, uh, when they give you your constancia or they give you your RFC, um, people have this fear that they're going to have to pay taxes or somehow the government's going to track you. Um, but the problem is the government's already tracking you with your immigration documents and everything else. That was my point. Giving the bank your personal information, it's always a risk, regardless of where you're at in the United States or Mexico. Um, but I talk about this a lot of times with friends of mine that talk about identity thefts. I've done a lot of fraud cases in my previous profession. And, the problem with fraud is sometimes you're just a random victim. And there are certain things that you can do, even with internet fraud, that you can do. Don't click on links and everything else. But even being the most careful as you can be, or being the most cautious that you can be, not all the time. not all the time is that going to keep you from being a victim. What you do need to do is make sure, and this is what I always say, this is even with, when they were talking about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump and on a president. If someone really wanted to pull it off, mm, yeah, they could probably do it if they were. What makes us so lucky with a lot of these attempts and everything else is that these aren't professional people. They're just person off the that disgruntled that wants to get attention. What you need to understand is that what the Secret Service does and what everybody does in the security field is they try to mitigate everything. For example, in the assassination attempt of Donald Trump, uh, uh, the there was a blind spot there that they didn't cover, and it wasn't really a blind spot; it was a very obvious spot, and that's why the shooter got up on the roof. If that place would have been taken care of, or people would have been around it or surveilling it, then that would have mitigated that problem. Would have kept the shooter from going to a different roof? Not necessarily. If he would have found a different roof, then their shooting still would have taken place. But what do? You prevent him from getting on that roof and this roof and the other roof, and you cover all the roofs so that hopefully nobody gets on a roof, any roof, and you don't miss a roof. So that's what you have to do when it comes to fraud and banks and giving your personal information out. You can't live in this world of information age without having to give something out. But you have to be judicious on what you give out and what you and sometimes I see it getting taken a little bit out of hand. I mean, how can you argue that you don't want the Mexican government tracking you with an RC when you have residency? You gave them your passport number, you gave them where you live, you gave them everything. You have a Mexican driver's license, you have all of these things that have established your life here in Mexico. If the government wants to find you, they're going to find you. Not having an RC is not going to help you hide from the Mexican government. So we need to keep things in perspective here. So thank you guys for tonight. I apologize I don't know how this is going to come out in video. I don't know if it's going to come out as two separate lives, but hopefully. Now the other reminder, and I should have reminded you, we have on the 25th, we have our YouTuber stuff. Stephanie, our YouTuber reunion. Stephanie tonight, RSVP'd, and I also got an email. That person that I got an email from, I will get back to you. We're in the process of trying to figure out how to communicate with everybody, whether through email lists. I think we're going to do it through a Facebook invite, not event page. So that's why I haven't gotten back to you, but I will get back to you. And we're trying to square all of that stuff away. Um, so if you do, and actually if you are RSVP, just let us know. Just go ahead and email me. If we get an event page up, it'll be easier to do it that way. But for right now, that way we can keep track of more or less how many people, we can have an idea how many people are coming. We have a lot of creators coming. I think our surprise guest kind of pulled out. I had some other um, engagements, but we will, I promise, have a great time because we have a bunch of creators coming. You'll get to meet those creators that you get to see on YouTube all the time and also ask questions about their life in Mexico. Um, what's better to ask in person instead of having to ask through a live? All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap things up for tonight and we'll see you next Sunday. I'm still gonna work on a subject for next Sunday and I'm gonna keep these live streams going and hopefully my audio equipment will work. But thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you. And until next time, as I always say, stay safe and stay informed.